So yes, I guess as a raise of hands, how many think that 5:45 a.m. is an early time to wake up? Oh, okay, well, we've got a good amount. I guess if you're doing morning devotion, it's too easy, but I think it's pretty early for me. And but it's interesting because if you wake up at 5:45 and you know you have a deadline for something in a couple hours, you're like, oh, why did I wake up so late? So it's an interesting, really, a change of perspective. And I also want to ask a different question. Has anyone ever stopped to consider, is there like an end point or like a stopping point for a relationship? Oh, we got some people who thought of it. Do we ever reach a point where someone says, that's it? Now that's as far as we go. We can't go anymore. I think if someone says that to you, I think that what they really mean is, I am angry at you. So I really think that there isn't really a stopping point for a relationship. Because I think if we don't do anything in a relationship, what tends to usually happen? It'll decline. It'll grow distant. Especially if you compare that when you have been investing into that relationship. So yesterday I had the chance to participate with CARP in the Divine Principle Education. We call it DPE for short, Divine Principle Education. It was online. It was a short seminar in a way. And I appreciate it because we were studying the first chapter, back to the first chapter, the principle of creation. So if we consider back to God's original blueprint. And we are studying the fifth section. It was the process of the creation of the universe and its growing period. And I think one takeaway I have with that is that, once we attain this individual perfection, and just a reminder of what DP explains about what is individual perfection, it's when that point where our mind and body are centered on God. If that's a little confusing, Divine Principle explains even further that it's a point where we're in total oneness with God's heart. So whatever God feels, whatever he desires, that's what we also understand too. And that's why we wouldn't want to commit any crime or sin, because then we know that would hurt God's heart instead. So it was really a takeaway, a surprise to me, where when we reach this point of individual perfection, it's actually still the starting line for direct dominion in God's ideal. Because why? Because that was just the first blessing. We still have 2 and 3. And I think God really desires, especially that second point with the family, God desires something so beautiful that exists between a man and woman and what comes afterwards with the children. So let's dive into what I have here for today. Just the brief words from Father Moon. And I really appreciate, I think on one hand, Mother really explains a lot about like flowers and the beauty of nature there. And on the other hand, he explains a lot about what the interaction of flowers, like the bees. Or at least that's my understanding. So as we see here, when spring comes and they taste real nectar, they become intoxicated. This is talking about the bees. When the flowers bloom in spring, the honeybees fly from flower to flower. If you look at the bees on the flowers sucking their nectar, their abdomens are raised up and their heads are buried deep in the flower. If you were to pull out the bee's abdomen with a pincer, it would still keep sucking, even if its abdomen separated from its body. How delicious that nectar must be. Now, how does the taste of that nectar compare with the taste of love? So, I just imagine that at this point with this bee, just sucking away at this nectar and just so engrossed into that one flower. But also just imagine on the reciprocating end, what about the flower? Just how much it could appreciate that this bee loves its nectar, this beautiful gift that it took time to cultivate. Now at this time that the flower can feel so appreciated. Wow, there's somebody or something that wants to taste something that I've created. So I think it's a beautiful way that we can see that the power of love can do. So this is the main point that I want to convey today, and I have some sub points about it. But if you can understand about this point, that we want to keep moving forward in your growth, no matter the pace, with God and other people. So I think if we're really in this mindset of growth, it doesn't really matter how fast you go or even how slow you go. If at any point you just keep moving forward. So if we really accept the idea that life is like a marathon more than just like a short sprint. Or maybe if you're thinking about the eternal, maybe it is a short sprint. But right now it really feels like a marathon, or I hope it does. But I know in this society we like to think like we want things instantaneously. Whether, that's the same day shipping with Amazon or that instant download. But I think when we go back to the context of thinking that life is a marathon, it's really a long-term commitment. So you wouldn't be sprinting, but you would rather pace yourself if you want to finish the race. And don't worry, I have some evidence that I've ran a marathon, just one in my life. I actually don't know the guy next to me. He was just with me in that race. He wasn't running a marathon, but it was a small local event at Long Beach. This was back in 2019, right before COVID. It was an interesting guy. He's like a barefoot runner. He just runs a lot of races. He's like, I'm amazed. This is your first marathon? I was like, yes. Let's take a picture. Okay. So here it is. But in my experience of it, at the first half of it, I felt pretty good. Like, if you don't know, the marathon's 26 miles and some change. In the first half, the 13 miles, I felt pretty good. I was going at my comfortable pace. But then I started getting a little, I think I could go a little faster than this. So I went, bless you. I went a little faster than I should have. And then at that point, I think you can tell that I burnt out. So in this marathon, I walked a good chunk of it. And I feel like in my mind, my high school coach was playing over in my head over and over, you can never walk. That's complete shame to a runner. But I was like, sorry, coach, I'm walking today. But I think just to understand that point, that if I had properly paced myself, I could have finished in a timely manner. That there's definitely going to be these bumps and roads, and I like to also think about this when we think about running, especially when it relates to the title. We often think, I don't know, does anyone ever watch Forrest Gump, the movie? A good chunk. So one of my favorite movies, and this is a famous scene where the other female main character, Jenny, is telling him to run, Forrest, run, because these bullies were coming after him. They were driving a car, but he was that fast that he can run. But I think it was interesting too, because for the longest time, I thought he was real. I thought Forrest Gump was an actual person. Did anyone also feel that one? Yeah. Yoshi. But sad news, he wasn't real. But I think it's awesome that we see this main character, Forrest. And then we also see the female main character, Jenny. They start in the same hometown. They grew up in the same school, but they have completely different journeys in their life. And you see the contrast too of what each one experiences. But at the end of the day, each ran their marathon, each ran their race. But at the end of the day, they did come back together. They came back to their same hometown, their same house. So I just illustrating that point that no matter how the road may be, it'll get bumpy. Maybe there are things that are scary, things that may be a little intimidating. But I think there's something beautiful, not only that awaits you at the end of this journey, but even as the process of it, the experiences that you gain as you go on this journey of life. So why is it important that we want to keep moving forward in our growth? But I think the first point I wanted to illustrate here is that you're loved no matter what. You're loved no matter what. And I think in this community, we commonly say in a different way that we aren't loved conditionally, but we're loved unconditionally. And by who? By God, our heavenly parent, and our true parents. So I want to illustrate another point here. As you can see, this is my family. This is my mother and father, my older brother, my two sisters. I don't know if you can see which one is me. I put a red box around me. Take after Pastor Joshua. Right? Yeah, back in the day, I didn't always look like this, if you can imagine. I had long hair. I especially had hair that made sure you had to cover both eyes. The bangs had to cover both eyes. Didn't matter what anything else looked like. It just covered the eyes. Because it was just a way for me to hide, or like to escape, or not to be seen. Like, I could see you, but you can't see me. And I was so shy and intimidated as a person that I would try to avoid people. And I would go, thank you. Maybe I'll grow it out later on in life. But yeah, I would try my best to avoid meeting people. Like, if I go out of my way just to, like, I don't have to interact, that I'm too scared to interact. Because I think at then, it's clear that I didn't really understand my own value. I didn't understand my own identity. And I definitely didn't understand that God loves me no matter what, just as I'm a child of God. So I think it's really liberating for me, and I hope for everyone else, to know that God is actually our heavenly parent. Yeah? And I appreciate, as a true mother, Mother Moon always shares to us, especially in the last year, all these different speeches as I've been studying, that she makes it a very clear point, whether she's talking to world leaders in like a world summit, or she's just talking to local members, or even just students, that you have to understand your Creator, the essence of your Creator. He is our heavenly parent. So I also wanted to make this point that you're loved no matter what, that God loves you no matter what, and just to explain a little bit about, well, how do I know if I'm experiencing God's love? What is God's love? And I think it's not necessarily in the big flashes, this holy blinding light. This is God's love. Maybe you've experienced that a couple times. I'm sure. Maybe not. And I think even for that bee, I don't think it has a flash of blinding light. This is where I need to go to this nectar. But I think, just like I mentioned before, if fundamentally the kingdom of heaven, it really stands upon families. I think that God wanted us to experience His love manifest in the family, in the relationships that we have with family. So that can be whether in the parental love, it can be in a conjugal love. And I want to really appreciate the love that I see between Pastor Joshua and Pastor Takayo Holmes, and their level of intimacy and the respect and trust they have with each other, that I want to also replicate, that I also want to inherit. And not just for as a young couple, but I also see that in our guests today, for Uncle John and Aunt Sandra. If you can give a hand to them, please. I was talking with them the other day, just the love and respect that they continually show me, even if we didn't meet that many times, or it's been a span of 4 years since we last met. We just pick it up right from there, and how much they want to impart their knowledge and wisdom. And a beautiful thing that I see between them, again, that conjugal love, that I can feel and see, that's God's love. And not just conjugal love, but of course siblings love, the love we see between brothers and sisters, and of course with children's love. So that's where I feel that God really wanted us to feel that God's love is true in our own life. Not this flash of blinding light, or this this holiness that comes out of nowhere. And I think if you haven't experienced that within your own family, as unfortunate it is in the society that we live in, that we still have a community that functions just like a family. And I think that Jesus knew that really well. Even though his own family didn't show him that respect, that love toward him, he still shared that and experienced that with his disciples. As we see in Matthew 12, from the verse 48. And this is Jesus. But he replied to the man who told him, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hand towards his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." So I think that just really illustrates the point that we could still feel God's love, maybe not in the context of immediate family, but the community, our church family, the family at large. And here I also want to bring a point about the beauty of God's love, just diving a little bit deeper in this. Father says, a sense of love is not one-sided. It is all-inclusive. Even cells function in that way. We sometimes say that people are intoxicated by love and that everyone should have this experience at least once. If you are intoxicated by love, when you call out to anything in the universe, it will respond without hesitation. You can sing for 1,000 years while watching water flow. I don't think I've reached that point yet when I could see a waterfall. I'm like, I could see this for 1,000 years. I think if you know Father's character, I imagine at least Father's character is, he would not only do that, but I can maybe watch another 1,000 years. Let me extend it another 1,000. But I think this is really the point that we can reach, this point where we can be so intoxicated with love that not only do we feel that we experience that, we're joyful about it, but we want to share that with others. And that could spill over in our families and our communities. So that's the first point, to understand that you're loved no matter what. So let's keep moving forward. That if you want to keep moving forward, you also have to understand that you're not alone. So I think if you also know about the movie Forrest Gump, Forrest also had companions. That he didn't go about it alone. That he had some friends help him along, especially in the military. Lieutenant Dan. There's I don't want to spoil some more, but but I was actually something amazed or astonished, I should say, what Pastor Joshua was sharing in the UPF event that we had the other day with Uncle Nasser and the esteemed guests at Pasadena House. But he was saying, what was really the number one cause of death today? And if you stop to think and consider that to be, maybe you can Google it. But he was explaining that's loneliness, the leading cause of death today. And I was just doing some research, and the one site was explaining that social isolation significantly increased a person's risk of premature death from all causes, a risk that may rival those of smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. And it also further explained that poor social relationships that's characterized by that social isolation, loneliness, was associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. I think we're at this point no stranger to understand that the things that are invisible, like especially about stress, can largely affect our own health, our well-being. And that very point of loneliness can affect us so greatly. So I know that if you're, again, studying further in the principle of creation, the divine principle, that God didn't design this world so that we can be lonely. This world is designed to function on relationships. So he wants really us to taste that preciousness of love. And again, if I really explained earlier that if God wanted us just to not experience that, he wouldn't have given the second or third blessing. He would have just stopped at one. So for me, I am learning this newer and deeper dimension of God's love as I go into the realm of individual to a relationship, a conjugal. And it's a new experience. So I really appreciate as we have this community, we grow together, can uplift one another. But also, I appreciate this, what it says in Proverbs 18:24, the point that we're not alone. There are friends who pretend to be friends, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I don't mean to call out, no, just find out the haters or find out who's fake friends. I just want to illustrate the point that even a friend can be even that closer, that feels like a family, feels like a brother, or feels like a sister. You can reach that point of intimacy. You can reach that point of closeness. And again, Jesus showed that very clearly. Who are my brother? Who are my mother? So I think it's also incredible that we can enter that space that goes beyond some social status or any position that we have in society. Now, it's not just, oh, he's a friend, oh, he's a coworker, or he's my roommate, but it can go beyond that level of dimension. That it can be closer than a brother. Because when you're alone, I think it starts to become easy to start having that give and take with just kind of negative thoughts, those intrusive thoughts that always come along. And I think it starts festering. If you add power to it, if you start thinking about it, it just grows more and more. That's the power of give and take. And I think it could be, I always, my own experience, it could be very easy to think, oh, I'll just do a service and not be here. And I could just, hang out by myself. They don't need me at this point. They don't need me in this moment. But I think that's a disservice to the people around you and to yourself if you think that way. So when we're alone, I think it's easy to go to other stimulants to fill that kind of hole in that gap of loneliness. I think Pastor Joshua was explaining yesterday that it could be very easy to be addicted to this. And I share the same, I'm in agreement. I could be guilty of trying to run away, of doing other things, instead of really facing what it takes in a relationship, what it takes to keep moving forward. And the last point that helps us to understand how we can keep moving forward is that you're able to reset. You're resetting. It's like you're starting fresh, starting anew. And that means that we can't just always cling to the past, or maybe what the labels had in mind, or what people labeled you as. I certainly don't want to be attached to that long-haired boy that wanted the hair in my bangs, not see anyone. But I know that it can also haunt us over and over. We play that maybe that experience or that thing that was said over and over. But we kind of make sure that we don't let that take over us. And if we really want to stand as co-creators, as what God wanted, what are we actually creating? If we are a co-creator, what are we creating? We're creating ourselves. And if we're open to this idea that we could start anew, and again, I just mentioned before, and I thank you for the LA band for playing this Grace of the Holy Garden. We're in this kind of the fresh spring where we start anew, start from grace. And if we're at this point of resetting, I think it's also important to understand that the problems that you're dealing with or the challenges that you face aren't just yours alone. Here, Father explains a little bit briefly here. Habits formed over a lifetime cannot be eliminated, even though you try until you die. Thus, it is logical to say that habits and fallen nature that have been passed down over millions of years cannot be rooted out with efforts made over a few centuries. This is a serious issue. So if we ever feel like, oh man, I thought I overcame this, or I thought I dealt with this once, and it keeps coming back over and over, we should also understand that that's what your ancestors felt. That's what previous generations felt over and over again too. And they struggled. They faced those obstacles too. And maybe they couldn't deal with it entirely. But that's why we're here too. Yes, we may be carrying some ancestral baggage, but we can also let baggage go. And I think it's an incredible heart that I feel like this community shares, where we want the next generation to be better than how we were. And I met a brother on campus the other day at Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach. And, just entirely new brother, just approached with questions. And I was saying, how can we create true relationship? What's the purpose of life? And I was asking him those questions. And he was saying at the very least, I want to leave a legacy. And I want to make sure my kids, they're going to be better than I am. Of course, I want to be the best, but I want to make sure that they're even better. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing, to have that kind of that heart expression, that we want to raise up someone's even better than us. And I think if we really want to go back to resetting, it's also important to understand your why. Why do you want to reset? Why do you want to keep moving forward? Why do you want to progress? Why do you want to change? Well, I think innately, that's within us. That even in our original minds, the depths of our heart, we do want to change. Especially if we're coming from a fallen state. We know there are things that we want to work on. Things that we want to improve upon. So we can be better not for ourselves only, but for those that are around us. And I think the last point I wanted to cover about resetting is that it's important to claim your victories. Your incredible victories, actually. I think, again, I'm coming from a community with all these incredible brothers and sisters, especially our elders, who laid an incredible and victorious foundation that we can stand upon. And I do want to appreciate. And I think that's God's heart too, that He also wants to appreciate what have you achieved so far. And then take a moment to reflect upon that. What have we achieved so far? But don't just dwell on that, but let's keep moving forward. What more can we achieve? I think that's God's heart too. The excitement, what is to be. So I think just to conclude here, I guess my call to action is something very simple. It just goes back to gratitude. If we want to keep moving forward in our growth with God and other people, it goes back to gratitude. And if you can take that moment, like when you're in the face of, maybe you're contemplating, I don't want to move forward, or I just want to be where I am. Maybe, I think it's interesting. I feel like when we're in deep thought, we tend to look down. Or maybe you tend to look up. I think I look down. But that's a good thing, because that goes in the action step. That you can thank your feet. You say, thank you, feet. And then you can say, thank you, heart. Thank you, feet. Thank you, heart. It's your feet that has made you where you are here today. And your heart that has prevailed through those challenges that you faced. Or maybe you're still facing now. And, since I'm coming from a Japanese heritage, you could say, thank you, Kokoro. And I like that because it sounds like you're talking to an old friend. Coco, row that boat. Coco, row. So keep rowing forward. Keep moving forward. That's all I have today. So if you can please join me in prayer. Our dear Heavenly Parent, our true parents, Jesus, thank you so much We feel that is your profound grace that has allowed each one of us to be here. And I know that you specifically know what each one of our brothers and sisters have gone through, what they're facing now, and what they will face later. But you face it with excitement, with hopeful excitement, God. And I pray that we could feel that too within each one of ourselves, that there is something to hope for, something to long for as we want to keep moving forward. And no matter what the pace may be, I pray that, God, it can be one that we can take together with you, that you can rejoice that we're not just designed to stay in the same spot over and over again, but we're willing to face one thing after the next, God, so that everyone could feel, God, the fullness of your grace and love as we want to share it. So I thank you, Heavenly Parent, for gathering us here today. And of course, I want to pray for the safe travels for those that are already going to Korea or going to Las Vegas, especially for our own pastors, Pastor Joshua Holmes. I think he's just about at the airport. And for Pastor Takayo Holmes, who has already probably landed in Korea at this point. But we thank you, Heavenly Parents, for the grace that they have shown us in the God, for your love as manifested through them that we feel too. So I thank you, Heavenly Parents, as we move forward to a new week, that there's something that we want to move forward in. So I thank you. I offer and import this in our true parents' name. In Jesus' name, amen. Adieu.
All right, let's give a round of applause for our Pastor Kengo.